Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Furlong, and today we're talking about the atoms of life. You may recall from your physical science class that all matter is made up of atoms. And although there are over 100 different elements, we're only going to focus on a few. These are the atoms that make up living things. And so those are carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. These 6 elements make up about 99% of all living things. So we're just going to focus on these 6. You want to remember them. A good way to remember them is by remembering the phrase CHNOPS. Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a fun word to say. Now recall that all atoms are made up of 3 smaller particles. We have protons and neutrons in the nucleus, and then flying around the nucleus are the electrons, and those are found on the electron shells or the energy shells. Recall also that all atoms need to have a complete outer shell in order to be stable. Only those noble gases come with a complete outer shell. So all other atoms are going to have to combine with another atom in order to have that complete outer shell. Now, why the outer shell is so important is because all the other shells are already complete, or they're full. Now, when atoms do combine with one another, they then form compounds. So a compound is when 2 or more different atoms combine together. Now, a simple one is like water. Water is 2 hydrogens and an oxygen atom. Something a little bit more complex is glucose. It's C6H12O6. So there's 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygen atoms. And together it makes a very stable molecule. This is a molecule of sugar. Now, holding these atoms together are atomic bonds. We're going to take a look at 2 of the more common types of bonds. One is a covalent bond, and if you recall from your physical science class again, in a covalent bond, atoms share electrons. So for instance, here's carbon. Carbon has 4 electrons on the outer shell. They need to have 8 in order to be complete. So carbon can share its 4 electrons with other atoms in order to have a complete outer shell. Well, in this example, we're going to use hydrogen. 4 hydrogens come along. Each hydrogen is going to share its 1 electron with carbon. Carbon is going to share 1 of its electrons with each of the 4 hydrogens. And now if you look carefully, we can count. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 electrons in the outer shell of carbon. It now has a complete outer shell and is very stable. The second type of bond is an ionic bond, and recall that in ionic bonds, atoms are going to exchange electrons. So for instance, here we have sodium, and if you look closely, sodium only has 1 electron on the outer shell. Fluorine has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So fluorine needs 1 more electron to have a complete outer shell. Sodium is looking to get rid of that 1 electron, while fluorine is looking to gain an electron. And so when that happens, that 1 electron is going to head on over to fluorine, and they are now bonded together. So now let's take a look at this sodium fluoride molecule. Notice sodium has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 electrons on its outer shell, so it's complete. Fluorine has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 electrons on its outer shell. It's now complete. Sodium becomes positively charged because sodium, which has 11 protons, now only has 10 electrons. So it has a greater positive charge. Fluorine, on the other hand, has 9 protons, but now it has 10 electrons. And so it has a negative charge. Let's go back to these 6 elements. And let's start with sulfur. So if we take a look at a close look at sulfur, we can see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrons on its outer shell, which means it needs to form 2 more bonds, or it has to share 2 electrons in order to have a complete outer shell. Phosphorus has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So how many do you think it needs? That's right, it needs 3 electrons. What about oxygen? Oxygen has 6 on its outer shell. How many more electrons does it need to have a complete outer shell? That's right, it's 2. Well, what about nitrogen? How many outer shell electrons does nitrogen have? Yeah, it has 5, right? So it needs 3 more. Oh, here's a trick one though. Hydrogen, it only has 1 outer shell electron. How many more electrons does it need to have a complete outer shell? You might have said 7, because we said that all atoms need to have a complete outer shell, and usually that means that they need 8 electrons on the outer shell. But hydrogen, only having 1 shell, can only hold a maximum of 2 electrons. So it only needs 1 more electron to have a complete outer shell. And lastly, if we take a look at carbon, carbon has 4 outer shell electrons, so how many does it need? That's right, it needs 4. Now, because of that, carbon is very versatile. It can form 1 bond with 4 different molecules. It can form 2 bonds with 2 different molecules. It could form 3 bonds with 1 molecule, 1 bond with another. It's a very versatile element. This is why life is based on carbon. Now we'll see this in another video, that in order for some molecules to make up living things, it's going to have carbon in it. So that's one of the nice things about biology. We don't need to know all these elements. We only need to know those 6. And I'll see you in class.